Well, I hope you've all enjoyed the convention. I've had very little to do with it. There's been many comments, compliments about the staff. Carrie Walling with membership, Candace Bullard, my daughter, with operations, Jaden Moreland with marketing and social media, and Karina Jones as our field operator. And we work for you. And somebody, not me, came up with this American spirit for the theme of this year's convention. Wasn't me, it was Jaden. So I rarely come up with new ideas. But I get the opportunity to interpret that. What does that mean? How do you characterize the American spirit? 3 words: lead, fight, stand. Lead the changes for the industry, fight for those changes and what you believe in, and stand your ground. And we can also characterize it in another way. And George Chambers, a former president, used to say this at every board meeting. And it was a quote by Winston Churchill. He says, never give in, never give in, never, 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 never. In nothing great or small, large or petty, never give in, except to convictions of honor and good. We borrowed that from our European ancestors. But we added something to it, purely American. It's right up here. Fighting for the independent U.S. cattle producer. That's what the American spirit is. And again, I work for you, our staff works for you. We're an extension of what you believe in, what you want to fight for, what you're going to lead, and when you're going to stand your ground. And we were tested early on. 20 years ago, one of our first issues was mandatory country of origin labeling in Washington, D.C. And in the final hours of the conference committee between the House and Senate version of the Farm Bill, we had 2 of our issues in it. You had 2 of your issues, mandatory country of origin labeling for beef, and you had a ban on packer ownership. So 20 years ago, we had the Packers and Stockyards Act at the forefront. We had mandatory country of origin labeling at the forefront. And we were asked at the final hours, about midnight, the staff of Senate Majority in the United States Senate came into the Capitol and said, we're about to reach a compromise. You have a choice. Do you want country of origin labeling, or do you want ban on packer ownership of livestock? And I said, our members want both. And they said, well, you can't have both. You can get one. Which one do you want? And I said, no, our members want both. Fight harder. And I didn't make any friends with him. And we earned our reputation at about that time of somewhat being uncompromising because we're willing to fight for what we believe in. Now, the country of origin labeling took a separate track. Country of origin labeling, as was indicated earlier today, took a while to get implemented. And we fought every step of the way to implement country of origin labeling, finally did in 2009, and only to have it overturned after the World Trade Organization's adverse ruling in 2015. We didn't quit. We litigated. We filed a lawsuit, said it was unlawful for the U.S. Department of Agriculture to be allowing these companies to take a foreign beef product and put a product of USA label on it. And our litigation efforts led to what is now a rulemaking to define the standards for a product of the USA. It must be born, raised, and harvested in the United States of America. And now we're jumped back into the lobbying arena, the legislative arena. We've got 3 bills for mandatory country of origin labeling. 1 in the United States Senate, now 2 in the U.S. House. 3 months ago, your chances of having mandatory country of origin labeling included in the 2023 Farm Bill was rather limited, close to 0. Now, we have a real opportunity to get mandatory country of origin labeling included. And so we'll continue to fight until we do. We'll fight until we win, because we're going to get mandatory country of origin labeling, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And then the Packers and Stockyards Act issue, at the time, was a ban on packer ownership of livestock. It later evolved to requiring the packers to purchase 50% of their cattle in the market, and then it evolved even further to the necessity of banning these unpriced formula contracts that meat packers use to leverage down your prices. And so that track began with requesting investigations. We requested an investigation of the USDA in 2006, again in 2009, again in 2015, and again in 2018. And then some law firm picked up on these repetitive requests for investigation, and you now have a multi-million-dollar historic national antitrust lawsuit filed on your behalf. What's happening here? Your membership dues are $100 for renewals. But we leverage that money in order to fund what is a historic, could perhaps be one of the largest antitrust suits filed in the United States. You've got the entire supply chain involved. Cow-calf producers, cattle feeders, packers, distributors, and retailers. In this case, as our attorney said yesterday, it's going to take a while to work through the system. But in addition to that, you've had a defense of the US Constitution, freedom of speech in a checkoff case. Now we have a pending checkoff case. We had the RFID issue. We've lobbied for it in the legislature, we've lobbied for it in the administration, failed in both those arenas, and then jumped back into litigation, and we're successful. And now we're back to fighting for it again, against it, if you will, RFID. So what we have accomplished, what you have accomplished, is unprecedented. In terms, some of the speakers have said, the reason country of origin labeling is alive today is because of you. In fact, it's been referred to in Washington, D.C. as the zombie issue. It just keeps coming back. And it will. It'll come back until we win. The RFID issue, as Harriet Hageman said, she was our attorney at the time, she's not going to quit. In fact, every speaker you had throughout this convention that stood at this podium or on this stage, they were fighting for you. All of them were willing to fight for what they believed in, and that happens to be what you believe in. It's a shared belief, and that's what sets us apart from all the other organizations out there. But we not only leverage your dollars in terms of being able to initiate and to enforce the law through litigation, but we work with broad-based coalitions. There's a lot of like-minded organizations that are involved in wanting mandatory country of origin labeling, and we work closely with them. There's a lot of organizations that want to see meaningful reforms in the beef checkoff program, and we work closely with them. In fact, we meet with those two groups every 2 weeks. There's a lot of people involved in the FTC DOJ merger guidelines reforms that are going on now. A huge contingency of organizations. We work with all of them. And we had Chuck Benoit talking to us from the Coalition for Prosperous America yesterday on tariffs and trade, and we work closely with them. In fact, sit on their board. So the only way we can accomplish what you want done is by leveraging our limited resources in a way that nobody else has ever been able to do. And as a result, we're making history. We're going to win the issues that you have asked us to fight for, and that will be never ending. So we have, in addition to the country of origin labeling, 3 bills in the United States House and Senate. We also have bills that cover every other major reform that you requested with respect to the Packers and Stockyards Act and competition issues. We've got the issue of 5014. We've got the issue of ban on packer ownership. We've got the issue of prohibiting these unpriced formula contracts. All of those are included in various pieces of legislation. We've had Congressman Kassar in Texas has introduced a bill that includes all of those requests. It also includes an expansion of country of origin labeling to include dairy and pork. And we have Senator Welch has introduced the Senate version of that bill. So all of the issues that you have wanted included as a matter of national public policy is now in legislation sitting in Washington, D.C., as the 2023 Farm Bill is now being discussed. And that's happened for one reason and one reason only, It's because of you. If it were not for you and the support that you provide for your organization, RCAF USA, and of course the staff that works for you, if not for all of us in the board you just heard from, none of this would have happened. We've never been closer. Never have we been closer in history of making some meaningful reforms to this industry to restore for independent cattle producers and aspiring cattle producers an opportunity to move ahead. And leading change, you heard from the Sheep Committee yesterday. We're leading the charge to preserve what is left of our U.S. sheep industry, to provide space for an opportunity for it to regrow and rebuild, and we're doing that in a very formal and official way that's caught a lot of attention. It's going to catch a lot more. And we will be forever labeled radicals. Good for you. Because you're willing to stand, you're willing to lead, you're willing to fight, and you won't give up. So thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the convention.